Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to another She Myth Eliminator story. Today, wow, I've got a bit of a treat for you guys today because I have got my good friend Wendi Schenkel on with me today. Wendi and I have been friends for the last few years because we have been kind of hanging around in the same kind of circles, doing similar stuff. So we've come to know each other quite well. I'm going to say that Wendi is one of those women who I see as being super strong and incredibly intelligent and very, very determined. So everything that Wendi does, I don't know what this woman does, but she seems to touch it and it turns to freaking gold. So I want to show you guys, or I wanted to share with you the brilliance of Wendi Schenkel and get her to tell you about her She Myth Eliminator stories. We were actually lucky enough to give Wendi a copy of the book before it actually went to market. So we actually asked her to be one of the pre-readers in our book and then provide an endorsement if she liked the book. And thankfully, she liked the book, gave us an endorsement, and her endorsement is actually inside of the She Myth book. But today, I asked her to be on the show so that she could share her story, share some of the things that she has encountered as a woman growing up in, and she'll tell you where she grew up, the she myths that she had to overcome and how she's actually managed to bust through all of those to get to the, I'm going to say, dizzy heights that she is right now, doing some amazing things. And like I said, everything the woman flamin' touches turns to gold. So welcome to the show, Wendi, and I'm looking forward to hearing your story.
Thank you so much for having me, Tracy, and thank you for the kind words. I adore you, and I love this book. So I am so excited to be here and share it far and wide, because reading your book, it really changed my life in a very profound way. And it's not just that we're friends and I respect you and love you, and I was looking forward to seeing this creation that you made, but it really, like, that it was just so validating, and to know that someone else was experiencing the things that I was, being in this like little bubble of being kind of like the weird one where I am, surrounded by like suburban moms and all of that. Like, oh, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for
You're
having me.
welcome. Well, let's start with tell us a little bit about Wendi. Where is she from? Where did she grow up? What do you believe in? Tell us a little bit about who are you?
Okay, so I normally split the year between New York and Florida. So, like, I'm what they would call in the U.S. a snowbird. This year it doesn't happen to be that way, only because of COVID. I'm in New York, and traveling 1,400 miles up and down the East Coast is just too challenging with like quarantines and things. But my primary business right now is I own an e-commerce business. We manufacture horse supplements. It's a formula that I came up with myself, and then worked with a girlfriend of mine to polish it up. And I own a horse farm, and I have a business that is a family business. It's my husband's family's business that I help, and I have some real estate investments and a digital marketing agency. Yeah, I like to do.
I know you got lots of stuff.
So, yeah, and okay, so where I came from, I grew up in Western New York, and my family did not have a lot of money. My mom was mostly a stay-at-home, but she cleaned houses, and she packed people's furniture to move. She helped my dad. My dad was a long-distance truck driver. There was a lot of struggle when I was growing up. I had 2 younger brothers. I was the only girl. We kind of lived in a little bit of the middle of nowhere, and so there weren't a lot of kids around. My household wasn't super religious, but my grandfather on my dad's side, they were a family that adopted my dad. My grandfather was a pastor at church, And so I had like this two different realities, right? Like I had the crazy at home chaos life, and then my grandparents would pick me up, and then I would be schooled on, all things Jesus, church. This is how ladies behave. This is your role in the world. Women don't lead. This is for the men. It was like the children are to be seen and not heard, and don't question anything, and obedience, obedience, obedience. And yeah, that's how I grew up. I met my husband when I was 19. By the time I was 25, I had 3 kids. And yeah, my last youngest child just turned 20 years old on December 25th. So I have 3 adults now.
Yeah, I'm feeling you with that. So, when you think about that kind of complete contrast of life growing up, so being in a household that's not really, religious as such, or as just maybe, so we could use the word, as disciplined, and requiring you to be an obedient young lady. How did that massive contrast impact you? Like, what pieces of that did you actually take on board and take with you into your adulthood?
That's a great question. Okay, so on the fly, just my knee-jerk reaction, and I didn't really have a chance to think this through. So, if you ask me tomorrow, I might have a little bit more depth to this answer. But to me, the church life really at the time was what success looked like to me, because it seemed the most orderly. It seemed like there was the most community. It seemed kind of like everyone was on the same team, going towards the same goal, had the same vision, and they wanted to help people, and it was charitable and all of those things. So I think at the time, that was what I was always striving for. And, with a little dose of suspicion here and there, because I was seeing like the hypocracy of it, and like listening to the church service, and like treat your neighbor well and don't gossip and blah blah blah, and then going to the lunch afterwards and then listening to them all tell each other stories and all that. Like it was very confusing as a child. But I think the lesson that I took from that was to listen to my own inner voice, and even if everyone around me was doing a thing, just because everybody else was doing it didn't mean that I had to do it too. So the right is right, even if nobody's doing it, and the wrong is wrong, even if everyone is doing it, kind of was playing itself out to me in real life.
And how fascinating is that? Because to me, like a young child, kind of looking at these 2 different lives, going there saying, oh, that looks like what I want to aspire to. And then hang on a minute, like this doesn't, it's a bit of smoke and mirrors. This doesn't kind of appear quite as real as it's made out to be. And then you as a child kind of running that through your head and determining, actually, that's not right, and this is right. So having sort of that skill at such a young age, or that level of awareness at such a young age, would have no doubt held you in good stead, like moving forward into your adulthood. But now tell us, so let's fast forward a few years. So we've kind of got the backstory of growing up. Then there's this period of time where you're kind of like a late teen to early into your adulthood, getting married, and then all of those sort of the backstory and the myths and the information that we gather then starts to play out in our adult life. What did that look like for you?
Okay, so that's a great question. When I was a teenager, like I wanted to do things, right? Like I wanted to be able to go places and things with my friends and buy clothes and things like that. My parents didn't have the money for that. So my parents would always tell me, well, if you want that, you have to get a job. And so I think I got my first job when I was 14. Yeah, it was 14, because that's the no, it must have been 15, because that's the legal age when you can first get a job here. And I was working at a pet shop, a retail pet shop, and I loved it. And I had my own money, and like So I learned how to sell being there on the sales floor. I'm like, oh, you need a hamster. Oh, well, you're going to need a this and a this and a that and the fish and everything that go with it and the bird or the cat or whatever it was. And I loved, it wasn't really even selling to me at the time. I just love animals. So I was like, oh, you're going to need like all these things to make their life amazing. And, having the perception enough to know when to stop, when someone was pushing back, or, like if they were into it more and more and more, because we were kind of having excitement there. And from there, a man that owned a car dealership came in to buy something for his daughter, or whatever. I can't even remember. It might have been a guinea pig or something. And I was telling them, well, you're going to need this and you're going to need that. And I'm like, and he's like, do you have a guinea pig? I was like, no, but I think they're amazing, and like, you should come work for me. Have you ever? And so I did. And so I went, and then I worked at his car dealership. I was 3 months there, and I became the salesman of the month. And I kept that title for I walked into this dealership. It was all men, and I'm the only girl there. And I'm like flipping cars like crazy. And then they moved me to the F&I department, and I loved it. It was a great time. And then from the car dealership, I got offered a job at Prudential Security by someone who came in to buy a car. And it was a great time in life. But as I was kind of developing myself professionally, my dad's telling me, go, 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 go. This is your ticket to freedom. Sales is one of the top paying jobs in the world. There's no top to this. So my dad was being really encouraging. But my grandmother, funny enough, was saying to me, you better slow down. No man wants to marry a career woman. You can't, you're going to intimidate men. You can't be this way. This is not a good way to operate. You're going to get enemies. Satan is teaching you for the lust of money. And I'm like, this is all a game to me. This is not a lust of money. I'm having fun. And anyways, all those mixed messages of my dad saying go, my mom being oblivious. I mean, she just wasn't involved really at all. And I'm not saying that in a callous kind of way, and then my grandmother, who I admired so much, she was my favorite human in the world, telling me, stop. You can't. And then one day I remember she used to watch the 700 Club, constantly on TV. And one day I had listened to the introduction so many times that I stood up in front of the TV and I started, rattling it off, as if I was the commentator introducing the show. My grandmother got up out of her chair and she looked like she had seen a ghost. She put her hand over my mouth and she said, don't you ever do that again. And I was like, whoa. And she said, women do not speak the word of God. Women are not leaders. This is not your place. Stop it. And that was it. Then I was like, oh, if I don't stop this, I'm not going to win my grandmother's approval anymore. And she was my favorite human being in the whole world. And so that was probably when I was like, okay, I got to tone this down. I am not going to be loved if I keep this up, because the person whose approval mattered to me most was telling me how unacceptable it was to be the center of attention. And that was it. So that was when I was like, okay, well, what's next for me? In order to get everybody's approval, the next step is get married, have kids, build the house, the family, and all that. And so that's where my life went next. It wasn't long after.
You went into that mode of shrink and comply.
Yeah, I had to. And everyone in the community that I was around at the time was giving me the same message. You're too much. You're too loud. You crossed the line. Tone it down. Yes.
And so knowing at that time, obviously, the way in which you dealt with that was to have how am I going to work my way around this? The way I'm going to work my way around it is I'll just shrink. I'll just kind of try and confine some of my vivaciousness and not allow that to come out anymore. I will, do the right thing in the eyes of some of those that are around me, that I then will get the approval of, because I can be the good wife, the good mom, do all the right things that some others felt was the right thing for your life. Now, talk us through, like, that obviously was a huge pivotal moment, because that changes everything, right? Like the trajectory of your life was like going in one direction at full speed, and then all of a sudden you're like putting these massive brakes on and take a deep breath, and you've got to pivot and go in a completely different direction. And given that we know one another, I kind of know some of the like where you're at now. So that being the case, that whole pivot, and it's not all bad, of course, when we pivot like this, there's some wonderful things that happen. But how did you feel when you actually had to do that? Like, what was the narrative that was going through your head, and the feelings that you were suppressing to enable this change to happen? The compliance to happen.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to like relive it. I think that's when I started to like get super introverted, and I knew I had to have a different set of behavior when I was with women, and I became very super sensitive to what it was like to navigate the dominance hierarchy in a female group versus the expectations of behavior when I was with men. And, you know, the men, I figured out, as long as I was doing well and helping them make money and meeting quotas and selling more, and, you know, that, like, I don't want to say, well, you know, like the things that men appreciate, you know, like the produce and the more and the this and the that. And then I realized, you know, like when I was with women, and again, I mean, I'm 45 years old. So we've evolved 20 something years since this time in my life. But there was a different code of ethics, standard of behavior, way to navigate it was like the Mean Girls kind of club. Like, and at the time I felt so lonely, because I was trying to reevaluate with my friends, like, where am I too much? When am I can't celebrate with them, because if I share with them what I'm doing, it's kind of like taboo, you know, like it was starting to become a thing. But I guess when I was that age, it was more like the big thing was women going to college and getting a degree, and especially going into like the STEM kind of thing. Like that was unheard of, like not unheard of, but it was like before its time. And yeah, I started to be much more careful when I was navigating relationships with women, because I was unsure of what that was supposed to look like. And I don't know, maybe I kind of got like multiple personality disorder or something, because I had one, you know, archetype when I was in one environment, and I had a different archetype when I was in a different group, because it was like survival then. You know, we weren't talking about the things that you talk about in the she myth then. It was something you were experiencing but nobody talked about, kind of like, you know, like now, you know, like Brene Brown kind of opened the Pandora's box with us all being able to talk about shame. You just didn't talk about it then. It was just the way it was. And if you couldn't deal with it, it was you were the problem. It wasn't the problem. It was you, because you hadn't figured out how to navigate it or avoid it or not have it be an issue. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, I turned into such a tomboy when I was with the guys. And then when I was with the women, I would just kind of sit and quiet and observe and, you know, like just try not to piss anybody off.
So what's really, you know, that's fascinating, this particular piece. And I'm glad that you've brought this up, because this is a part of the sisterhood where we want to create. It's almost like the church, right? You're saying, you know, on the outside, it's like everything looks fantastic. We've got the sense of community, camaraderie. It looks like the amazing success that it is. And then somehow behind the scenes, you're sort of sitting back watching, and then you figured out, hang on a minute, this isn't quite right. So the interesting part of this is that as much as, and I'm going to call it out, because as much as we as women, you know, we'll often say, and I'm going to use the communal we, but often, as you know, we want to do this. We want the sisterhood in most cases. But yet, so that's what the facade looks like on the outside. But yet, then when somebody like you, and I'm sure you were not the only woman in that environment at that time who was feeling the same way. So then we've created this environment where all the women are sitting there trying to be quiet, not really sure what to do, what to say. And then you get this real inauthentic environment that gets created because nobody feels comfortable enough to just step up and stand firm on what they believe in, be themselves, and the other women around us allowing that person to be themselves and loving them just as they are. So we end up in this really funny, icky situation where you're just molding each other to be something that you're not. And like you say, you end up having this kind of, oh my God, I feel like I'm a split personality because over here I can be me, and then over there I've just got to kind of tame it down. And this is the new me over here. So and you're not alone with that, because that happens time and time and time again. So one of the things that I think we can do today is to talk about this question: what can we do from here on in to make sure that our fellow sisters do not feel like that? Like, how do we as women have to show up to enable the person to the right and the left of us, allowing them to be their own person and loving and respecting and enjoying them just as they are? What do we have to do to make that happen?
I love that you asked this question. I do not have all the answers, but I have found something that has been working for me, especially the last 18 to 24 months or so, when I got really deliberate about this. I had some really life-changing events that happened in my personal life that really called me to the floor to answer some really fundamental questions about who I was, who I wanted to be, and what I wanted my life to look like. And one of the things when I was going through working with a psychologist that came up for me was to do a better job about choosing who I keep in my inner circle and having Teflon skin for everybody else, and not in a nasty kind of way. But one of the things that I discovered was I made some rules. And one of my top rules now is I will not spend time gossiping with people. I refuse to do it. Same thing with my daughters. If there's something that somebody else does that irritates them or like they think is like discussion worthy, we talk about it, in that I wouldn't do this because I think there's ramifications, or this hurts me when I see this because it reminds me of. So we talk about that instead of shaming the other person or, gossiping just for the thing of spreading gossip. The other thing that I realized too in working all this is, how they say your best friends are the ones that can stay with you when you're going through something difficult?
Yeah.
I call bullshit on that. And here's why. Misery loves company. You can always find another woman that will sit beside you and hear your sob story, and she'll get drawn into it, and you can dig yourself a deeper pit with the victimhood and the sob story and the misery and the company, and you can bond, and you can have a bitching bond. Like, that's the only thing I can think to call it, is you can have a bitching sister. Like, the two of you can go on and on unproductively forever and just talk about miserable things. And what I realized is when I started spending less time or eliminating those people from my inner circle and loving them from far away instead of up close, I started spending more time with my girlfriends that I knew would celebrate with me and wanted the best for me when I was at my best, and wouldn't let me get sucked in to the old stories and the victimhood and going back there to that place, because I could make myself so upset. I could relive it as if it was happening all over again. And instead, I choose to be around the women that are inspiring and encouraging and uplifting and want the best for themselves and the people that they love. And so I think if we can all do a better job, not only of spending more time with those type of women, but evolving and becoming mature enough to become those women for other women, we could really find a way to unite together and lift one another up in an authentic way that's meaningful and make life less suffering for us all.
I love that, Wendy. You put that so beautifully, and I agree. And, those moments where you are, down in the dumps, and, sometimes we all get there, but it is those close friends that are there that are going to help lift you up and help get you out of those situations. When I'm always looking at, who do I keep in my close to me and in my inner, it's those ones. And I take a wide berth of the others who, as you described, want to create the bitching bond. Because like you, I figured out too that is not a place that you want to be, and it serves nobody. So I love those pieces of advice, and I know that you absolutely live by those, and as a result of that is, I can see it in everything that you've been doing of late, that has started to kind of like resonate, out of vibe out of your very soul, because all of that is happening. So the next thing I wanted to talk about, thank you so much, because that was brilliant.
You are one of those women.
Oh, thank you, and ditto.
You are absolutely one of those women.
Say, I am so lucky, because I have got so many amazing women that are in my sphere, and I love that. I've got a great mum, I've got awesome extended family, my sister, all of the people that are in my life are really supportive people, as are all of my business associates and friends. So I'm extremely lucky from that point of view. But it has been, very deliberate. As you said, it's not none of this stuff. When you go through life and you sort of hope that everything happens a certain way, you can attract the wrong stuff. But when you're very intentional and very deliberate about what it is that you want, and you mentioned this, you got to a point where it was like, no, I want to know and understand, who is Wendi? What is Wendi about? What do I stand for? What do I believe in? What do I really want in my life? And then you took that and you looked at it in the mirror and said, well, I don't have that right now. So what do I have to do to make a change? And you made those changes, and you are, you've mentioned to me you're better for it now. So congratulations to you. Before we wrap this up, because we could go on for ages, so I need to have you back on another show so that we can talk more about this, because I know there's so much more to Wendi Schenkel that could be amazingly shared with other women to help rise them up too. So, and support them. So the last thing I want to know is, because you had an opportunity to read the book a little early, what part of the book did you enjoy the most? Like, where was it that in the book that gave you I suppose the biggest aha or transformation? Let's call it that.
I think it was definitely the part about the name calling, because I could completely relate to that. I have been called every name in that book by people that I wanted so desperately to have their approval. And it's such a crazy journey, because I think that your book had so much of an impact on me and making me realize how manipulative all of this feedback that I was getting from the people around me had been, and like molding who I was. Tracy, I took a personality test like 3 years ago, because I had to, for this business opportunity that I was getting into. And since I have read your book, I'm not kidding you, I retook the personality test just last night. Yes, just last night. And it has actually rewired my results on a personality test, because I was just got to a place where, instead of being someone who wanted to be the good little girl and follow all the rules, to saying, like, I don't have to just be who everyone's telling me I am. And just because they're telling me this is how they're receiving me, doesn't mean I'm necessarily showing up that way. And so hearing and reading those words in your book and saying, you know, you're bossy, you're bitchy, you're loud, you're this and that, and all these things, I don't have to stop being those things. I mean, there are times certainly when it's appropriate and when it's not, but I had so shut that down. I was not allowing that part of myself to come through. So that meant I wasn't standing up for people that needed an advocate, or I wouldn't call somebody out that was behaving badly, or I would leave a situation instead of digging in and making a difference. And, you know, since I've read the She Myth, and I say, this is a movement that if we would all just be open-minded to it, we wouldn't do these things that are so insidious to each other that we might even not even realize we're doing it because it's just become a habit and culturally acceptable. That I want to be the change that I read on these pages. And I mean, there's so many other things, but you asked for one. And I think that was the one, just accepting myself and saying, okay, I'm enough and this is okay. And you know, maybe these people were trying to protect me, but I don't need that protection. I don't need to fit into that mold to be acceptable. And not only that, the future that I see and that I believe that I'm capable of, I can't stay that person and achieve these things because I need to be strong, and I need to be all of me and integrate all those pieces in order for this to work. Or I can't carry that crown because I won't be strong enough to hold it up. So yeah, that I think is my favorite part. Like, so much of it, right? Like, and I don't want to just make it for me. I want to join you in your crusade, and Vicky and Robin and everyone that reads the book to like make it pledge, a sister pledge, that we are all going to commit to doing it better for the sake of all of us. And, you know, I have 2 adult daughters now, and I don't want them to come up that way. So yeah, that's my favorite part.
Thank you so much, Wendi. And how that is amazing. That just puts a huge smile on my face to hear that you've read it and that it's had that profound effect on your life and it's made a real difference. And thank you for joining us on this crusade and on this mission to make the world a better place and to make it better for women everywhere. So thank you so much for that. The last question I've got is, I want to know, if you were to give yourself some, I'm going to ask you this one because I think this is, if you were to wind the clock back and you had an opportunity to go back and sit next to Wendi Schenkel, 10-year-old young girl, what piece of advice would you give her?
Oh, at 10. I would probably tell myself it was okay to be different. It was okay to be weird. Maybe the world just isn't ready for this message yet. You're going to find your people eventually, but they're not going to come to you. You're going to have to go find them. And if you don't find them, you're going to have to become that person and create a person that someone would want to be around instead of going and looking to be accepted in a group that's already established, I think. Yeah, that's a really deep question, Tracy, a really deep question. And yeah, as I have more life experiences, I probably would want to change that. But that was a really lonely, confusing time. And yeah, I
contemplate that question too, you know, and I think that's something that for everybody who's listening now, I would today, maybe that's a question that I have for you to stop and think, okay, where I am right now, if I had to go back and give my former self, so my young self, whether it's at 10 years old, at 15 years old, what advice would I give myself with the knowledge of what you know now? what would you say to yourself back then? And when you do that, because something really interesting happens when you do that too, because that also gives you an opportunity to rewrite the story that you were telling yourself. So I'm going to encourage you guys to do that. I'm going to encourage you to go back, whether it's the 8-year-old or it's the 10-year-old or 15-year-old, whatever time in your life it was, pick a time, sit down next to yourself, and give yourself a piece of advice, knowing what you know now. So I'm going to say thank you so much for joining me today. And
Thank you so much for having me.
Story, Wendi. We've gone way over time.
Oh, sorry.
No, I mean, really, that's my fault. I'm the timekeeper, but it was so good. I didn't want to stop. So I'm hoping that that was okay, given that we've kind of gone 20 minutes over. But such good information inside of there, really insightful advice. And thank you so much for being the woman and the sister and the support that you are to not just to Vicky and I, but to many, many other women who admire you. So thank you for that. For those of you who have not yet purchased the She-Myth book, you guys know where to go by now. So just below me, you'll see that there are two websites you can go, well, one website, but one in America, one in Australia, so amazon.com. All you need to do is go to amazon.com or amazon.com.au, type in the She-Myth, and you find the book. You can buy it on ebook version, and you would also have an opportunity to buy it paperback or hardback copy. Get yourself a copy of it, read those, start rewriting your stories, and start going out into the world by standing up, standing firm, and standing out. And if you can do all three of those things and join us on our mission to create a better place for women, then, little by little, we will start changing the narrative and start changing the entire fabric of the way in which women are treated in this world. So thank you very much for joining me, and I'll see you guys back
Thank
again
you so much
for another She-Myth Eliminator story. Bye for now.